Hello and welcome. We are talking today about the reality of burnout and mental health for leaders. So, if you have not been paying attention to the news, the 40th Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has recently stepped down, citing burnout as the reason. And Carrie Ann and I were recording for my podcast last week, and right, this was a hot topic. And so we decided to go live today to talk to you guys about, you know, burnout and leadership. And especially for us as females in leadership, right? There's some things that we have to deal with, just quite frankly, that men don't have to deal with. And it's not just about, the things that we have to do in the home and the motherly responsibilities or the wife responsibilities. There are other factors that we as women have to deal with. So we're going to be talking about some of that today. And without further ado, I am going to welcome Carrie Ann.
Kylie.
Hey.
This is such an important topic about burnout and particularly as it relates to being in leadership. So I'm really glad that you decided to do this.
Yeah. And so just off the top, I want to say that she was the world's youngest head of state when she was elected, and she was the second woman to a baby, have and deliver a baby while she was in office. So, right, she was leading a country and nursing a newborn. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
wearing all the hats all at the same time.
Yes, for
Um,
sure.
so, Carrie Ann, tell us your thoughts about what's happening and how you feel about this article, because we had so much, like, there are so many good, juicy nuggets that we were talking about the other week.
Yeah, Kylie, and I think one of the reasons why I thought this would be a relevant topic for you because you're such an expert in the field of burnout, mental illness, particularly as it relates to leaders, and obviously the work that I do with owners of small and medium-sized companies. There's just this nexus there. So I think one of the things that struck me about her Jacinda's speech, which if your audience has a chance to take a look at it, I think it's worth looking. I know this is about it's been about 2 weeks now, so this could be old news for some, but I think within the context, this is not old news in terms of the idea of leaders resigning because of burnout. But in her speech, she said leaders are human beings. She said the thing she said, political leaders are human beings, but we can extrapolate that leaders are human beings, period, done. And and one thing that struck me about that was sometimes when we are leading, we no longer think of ourselves as human beings. We think of ourselves as the leader of whatever it is we're doing, particularly in the case of running a business, and your team is looking to you to not be human either, right? Because
Right.
they're trying to look to you, and no one really wants to think of the leader as the one who's going to like fall down. But the idea that leaders are human too, therefore, because one of the things that you're really into is not just identifying burnout, but burnout prevention. And
Yes.
so recognizing you're a human, even though you're leading a team or leading your business or whatever capacity that you are leading, just recognize you remember you're human. That alone it's a long way. So I really loved when she said that. It's like, yep, leaders are human too.
Yeah. And like we were talking about earlier, if you look at how long she's been in office, where she got in at 37,
Mm-hmm.
she's
Mm-hmm.
now 42. She's been in
Mm-hmm.
office for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Compare that to what we do here in America, right? We have, a president that goes for 4 years, and then if he
Mm-hmm.
gets elected to a second term, that's a total of 8 years. So she's actually served a term and a half
Yes.
in US standards.
Mm-hmm.
So she's
Yeah.
been through a lot. And
It's a long time. And remember we were saying, like if you can look at the president, like our presidents, and usually when that second year of the second term comes about, they're looking very older than they were when they first came in. And some of them look better than others, but it really is. So I think just if you were to ignore all of the pressures and ignore, sort of the threats and all that kind of stuff, 6 years is still quite a long time. And I think, so I'm really glad that too. One when she said that, she's like, a leader knows
Yeah.
when it's time to step down. It's like, when they give all they can give, and then they need to know when it's time to step down if they have no more left in their tank. And I think that also is an important thing for leaders to recognize. But there's the prevention part of it, the stuff that you work on and you work with your clients on. So what are some things identifying when you might be going towards burnout? What are the things we can do to make sure it doesn't happen? But then also recognizing when you are at the point where you no longer have anything else to give, knowing what you need to do in order to address that, or if it means stepping down, stepping down.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my case, what I work with my clients is in hopes that they never feel like they have to step down from running their company, running their business. And it's because it's all about burnout prevention. Not to say that, she didn't have these tools at her disposal, but there's only 24 hours in a day. Some of
Yeah,
the tools that I give to my clients, like setting boundaries, leading a country,
different kind
who
of
knows
thing.
what kind of boundaries you can actually set, and the
Right.
firm, you know,
Yeah.
and how many assistants did she have? And because I'm a big proponent, I think you are as well,
Mm-hmm.
hiring a
Mm-hmm.
team to get
Mm-hmm.
things off of your plate. But I know there are certain things that are, confidential, and there's security levels, and you
Yeah.
can't like, right, confidential documents,
Yeah.
like there's so
Yeah.
many factors in
Yes.
how much you can release to an assistant or to someone to help you in,
Yeah.
when you're in a political office because of the confidentiality
And
issues.
that's the issue, So you're looking at running your own business, and then depending on what size or how large the business is or what type of business it is, there are some things you can't necessarily outsource per se. And if you're like, some of your, audience is sort of listening and they're sort of in politics, I'm sure there's some things that are more difficult to manage than if you were trying to manage it within the context of running a business.
Yeah,
But you even think about how when the Obamas were in office, Mrs. Obama brought her mom in to help to make sure that the kids were taken care of in a way because she knew she wasn't going to be able to be as present as. So there are some things, while you can't necessarily outsource some of the roles you play when you're running your business, being able to create structures in place that it takes some of the load off helps.
right.
But in the end, there's maybe just some things that you can't, maybe no matter how many things you put into place, you can't deal with. And so maybe you're sort of realizing this is the stage of your business or the stage of your life that you are kind of hunkering down a bit, and you got to like head to the ground kind of, and then but that there's like a light at the end of the tunnel as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Like there are certain things you can't outsource. I was thinking about like feeding a newborn.
Yes.
That's something you can't outsource. But I've
Yeah.
heard
Yeah.
of, couples, and, my ex-husband was
Hmm.
kind of good sometimes about, I'm feeding and then taking the baby after the feeding, doing the things that, he could do, like changing the diaper, bathing and things like that. So, right,
Yeah.
there are other ways to distribute responsibilities in like other parts of your life. I mean, let's
Hmm.
talk about like you can outsource your grocery shopping, right?
Right.
Instacart or DoorDash if you need it,
I know exactly.
right? Especially if
Yes.
you're sitting at your desk and you're hungry, and like get the DoorDash, right? We need to
Yeah.
fuel our bodies. We need to make sure we're
Hmm.
fueled up. We need to make sure, we're hydrated, you know.
So important. So
Yeah,
important.
like taking care of the physical, the mental, the
And I
spiritual.
think too,
Yeah.
there's the burnout can often be. I am at different stages of my business. I am in thinking mode, and I'm constantly strategizing around a problem, or I know when I'm in that place because my brain is always churning and I'm always thinking. And mental energy is actually even more exhausting than physical depletion, because you are constantly thinking, but that could be the stage in your business and where you're constantly thinking.
Yeah.
So, I would say, obviously you're the expert on this, but I would say just being aware that you are constantly thinking or you're having a lot of very intense intellectual conversations, it allows for you to be aware that it's happening, because I think sometimes we don't realize that we are exhausted, that like, well, I sat in the office all day, why should I be exhausted? How many conversations did you have? How many problems were you fixing? How many client meetings were you having? So a large part of this is just even being aware that there is energy being expended, even though we might enjoy it and love it, but there is energy being expended. And maybe the antidote to that is getting out of your office, getting out in nature, being able to, the energy we get from just even being in nature alone.
Yeah.
People, like, I think some studies now circulating around how if we can see water for a certain, like, each person needs to see water for a certain period of time, a certain amount of time in a particular time period. So, if you have a body of water, if it's a lake, a puddle,
Yeah.
pond, a
Or maybe
stream,
even having a
any
water feature in your
having
office.
a water feature, that alone, gets you. You can also, if you take your shoes off and go out into the grass, so your
Yeah.
feet can feel nature. Even leaning or hugging a tree, there is a lot of energy that gets transferred through that. So a
Yeah.
part of it is,
I know those
not,
tree huggers knew what they were doing back in the
they
day.
knew what they were doing, Kylie. And the thing is too, like, we often, those of us, you and I, and some of the folks listening, likely will never be running a country,
Yeah.
but we are expending energy, time, in a lot of those things, in doing the things that we lead in our lives. So this concept of burnout runs across the board. So it's important to be aware of how it's showing up.
Yeah. I talk about the four major, I don't know if I have it, but it's the concept of the time wheel. So if you draw a circle, cut into four quadrants, TIME, right? T stands for time, obviously. I is for ideas. So that's the mental, the churning. M is for money, right? And you just recently posted about like money and the different types of money that you need for your business. And E is for energy. And then in that E quadrant, I mostly tackle like the physical energy, the stuff that's happening in your body, the stuff that's happening in your environment, in your space. Like you said, if we can put some water in our space, or if we can, you know, have a grounding space, things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you think they're kind of foofy and like, well, like that's a little foofy for me. But, when we're talking about running our businesses, you know, we're like, well, I'm not there yet. Like maybe I can't afford to be near a body of water, right? I don't have the corner office that overlooks the ocean.
The ocean.
But it's just because you're not there yet, it doesn't mean that you don't get to take care of yourself and take
Yes.
care of your needs.
Yes.
And I know from women and moms, especially when we say, oh, yeah, take care of yourself first. One, they're thinking, how? How do
Yeah.
I take care of myself?
How and when.
It's like, how and when? Like, I have these, kids like clawing at me and like they want this and they want that, and they feel like they cannot detach from the different responsibilities that they have. And then you add on running a business, especially now we're all running our businesses from home, or during COVID we've shifted to, even if you are working in the corporate space, you know we we all shifted to working from home and we're
Yeah.
working remotely. Then people are now slowly going back to the office, but there are some people that I know who are doing, they're still rotating in and out of the
Right.
office.
Hybrid. Yeah.
Yeah, in the hybrid, and also to still manage, because I live in California, right?
Yeah.
Still managing the social distancing and how many people are in the office at one time to
Yeah.
avoid overcrowding and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. 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 I think you want to start how you want to go along as it relates to your business. Yes, for sure. At some point in time, you need to be thinking about hiring an executive assistant and then someone who's helping you with some of the life things that you're doing in your business, well, in your life.
Yeah.
At the same time, so maybe now is not good for that because of resources and such. But thinking about what are some of the things you really can get off your plate so that you can rejuvenate is an important step to growing as a business owner
Yeah.
exponentially. We often think we have to have incremental steps, like when this happens, I'll do this then, and then when this happens, I can do this then. The thing is, if you had more of one resource, you could sort of leapfrog over all of the incremental steps to go to the next step, 5 steps ahead.
Right. Like
So
what's that
I
one thing that you can use to
right,
catapult
to
you?
catapult you further. And sometimes that is the scary, oh, I'm going to hire someone to clean my home because cleaning the home is taking way too much energy where I could be investing that energy into spending time with my kids and then also into the business.
Yeah.
So you might think, well, where am I going to get this resource, these resources? Well, then you can kind of look and see if you think it's important, if you can see the benefit of that leverage, then you might find a way to be able to afford it. It's really when that you believe that you really do deserve it
Yeah.
and you're worthy of it and that it will impact your ability to leverage your business and get better results, or you don't believe. And if you can, even if you have a little bit of belief, that goes a long way. So step into the little bit of belief, and then sort of the whatever the path will show its way once you step into it.
Yeah.
But there's just no way for us to build businesses by still sh- showing up in a way that we're tired, exhausted. Those days of 24 hours on all the time is just not sustainable and not cool.
No, it's not sustainable. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, my internet is still good. Thank you.
I
I heard it coming.
know we got like pray to the internet gods.
Yes. Yes. Well,
Mhm.
when I start working with clients, the number one, the chief complaint that they have is when I say, well, have you been taking care of yourself? Blah, blah, blah. I don't have enough time, which is why the time wheel, like that's how that thing got invented. Cause it's like,
I
well,
love that time wheel, by the way.
yeah.
Love it.
So the other part of the time wheel is if you're looking at it in a circle, I don't know where I had a little post-it note here. I don't know where it is right now. But T and M are on opposite sides of the wheel because time and money are proportionate, right? How we're
Mhm.
talking about right now, you can leverage your time by paying out some money to buy some of your time back,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then the ideas and the energy on the opposite sides of the wheel, right? We have a lot of ideas, but if we're sitting and we're stewing in those ideas, you know, we don't have the energy to execute, there's no way that we can get the innovation that we need to move our businesses to the next level because you're
Right.
talking about, right? Like there are times when you know, we have a lot of ideas and we're like, oh, this strategy is great. And then we brainstorm and and then we have the whiteboard and we're, doing all the things. And then we're like, huh. And then you're looking at it all like, oh, okay, so now I need to execute on those,
Execute this. I need to
right?
execute this.
But that's when, right, as the CEO of your business, right, you're responsible for coming up with the innovative ideas. And then if you have a team to distribute them to, then it's like, okay, I did my job. Here it is. Here's the grand masterpiece. Okay, team, we'll have a meeting and okay, this part goes, this part belongs to the IT department. Like if you have a tech VA or if you have an all-in-one, virtual assistant or an executive assistant, right? What parts are they going to do? What parts are you going to do? And what I tell my clients is anything that does not involve your face needs to be outsourced. Like this, like I can't have my
Yeah.
virtual assistant come and do this interview.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
but
Right.
as soon as I shut this interview off, right, like I can give them
You're done.
right, they can
You're
grab the
done.
video, they can go put it on all the well, actually, this is a simulcasting app, so it's on all the platforms already,
Yeah.
which is another thing that I tell my clients to invest in. If you can't afford an assistant to do things manually for you, look for a tool that will do that. Is right, what is
Yes.
paying like 10, 20, $50 a month for software that will buy back your time? Because right
Yes.
now I'm simulcasting to 5 different, sources right now. If
Hmm.
I had to download the video, upload it, the
Do some edits. Yeah, it
it
would be. Yeah. And I think too, when you start thinking about automation, at this stage to sort of buy time,
yeah,
when I speak to companies, because one of the reasons that they come to me is because, okay, they are unable to scale the company. It's been a bit, and they're not
and
getting
that
to the place where they need
plateau,
to.
huh?
And the real reason, a lot of times around scaling, obviously, I have to do an assessment to know. But one of the things around scaling is there needs to be the ability to create systems and processes that can also be scaled. And whether or not those systems and processes are automated through software or through the way in which people do it in your company, that is one of the key things to determine whether or not a company can scale, is if these processes and systems can be scaled, and moved forward in that way. So this is not really just an issue of when you're a solopreneur and you're creating, you're trying to find ways to find time, but it's a way of building your company so that it can scale. Because the goal here is to build an entity outside of yourself.
Yes.
But if you are constantly trying to juggle it all and carry it all, then you are going to hit burnout. And to me, I mean, tell me if I'm correct, because you're the expert on this, but I think at some point, it's like holding a book of a whole thing of encyclopedias. If, I don't know if people know what encyclopedias are anymore because but a whole stack of really heavy books, you can hold them for a bit on
Yeah.
your own with your own sense of like own strength. But there is a nexus point, a tipping point, when the body just says no. It just says no. But if you're at the end where you're still not at collapse time, you can recover. But there's a point when after which there is not really recovery, or the recovery takes drastic measures.
Yes.
So it seems to me that one of our roles as being leaders in our own companies and leaders of our lives is to see when we are pushing ourselves to the point where we if we go one more step, we're going to go down the hill and it's going to be a long way down, or when we're right at the brink, right on the precipice, and if we sort of pull back, we can still save what we have built.
Yeah, and honestly, when, I didn't realize I was in burnout. My
Mm-hmm.
husband had to tell me. He's like, "Why are you so tired all the time?" I
Mm-hmm.
thought my level of tiredness was normal for
Yeah.
working in oil and gas and being a shift worker,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of times when we have new responsibilities or promotions at work, not a lot of things drop off. It's like they just kinda accumulate and they just pile on, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure. Let's take this promotion. Oh, but can you also keep doing this because we don't have anyone to replace you?" It's like, "Sure, why not?"
Mm.
And I know sometimes we get into the conundrum, well, I'm the best person to do this job, so I don't want to let go of this because it takes me 20 minutes to do this. If I were to train somebody, outsource to them, or even if you're working in a company right now and you gave it to someone else on the team, you know that, and especially if there's a backlog of work happening, you know
Yeah.
that there's going to be a downshift because there's that learning, training time to get that other person up to speed. So if that's what happened with me. It's like there was a backlog
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
well, I am the best person to do it. And if I take 20 minutes, the other person takes an hour, that's 3 times as long. So then the backlog will get 3 times as long as
Yeah.
well. And then we're going to be that much more behind. So,
Exactly.
let's just suck it up and let's just keep it going until we can get the backlog down to a manageable state. And then I will outsource to
Yeah.
a
To
person.
something, yes.
But
And
it
then, but
never,
in the meantime, you're basically running yourself down the hill.
yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's what was happening to me until my husband was like,
Right too.
something's
Yeah.
wrong. You should go get checked out. And I was in denial. It's like, no, I'm fine. And then he's like, no, you really should get checked. And my husband's not one to, you know, to worry much or to say much. But when he said it like the third time, I was like, okay, this is something that's really important to you.
Right.
So out of love and respect for you, okay, I'll go check it out. There's nothing wrong with me, but sure, I'll go check it out.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
wanted to check off a box. I love checking things off boxes.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
schedule doctor's appointment, take blood test, go, get
You're
the
like, you just checked it off, but then that's when you sort of got the reality, like, oh, this actually is a thing. You
yeah.
know?
When we
Yeah.
got the test results back, that was the last check. Get test results and prove that there's nothing wrong with me.
Right. Right. Right.
And then
And then you're like, oh wait, actually, there is something wrong.
there was something wrong. And then I went through the healing, and but thank God that I found the person that I found is back in 2015, 16. Adrenal burnout was not on the radar. It,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I had to go to a naturopath who was also an MD. So
Hmm.
he lived on both sides, Eastern and
Hmm.
Western medicine, but he
Yeah.
was able to, you know, um, see my test results and read it in such a way like, oh, okay, this is what's happening inside of your body. And here's a healing protocol that we're going to put you on. And I was able to heal and recover. But I was so used to popping pills for everything. So I was like, yeah, let me pop the pills and let me continue living my
Yeah.
life this way.
You're like, no, there's no pill popping happening here.
Yeah. And so he was like, wait a minute. So that's why I ended up taking 3 whole months off of work in order to
Right.
recover. Because he's like,
Hmm. Hmm.
I didn't realize that, you work these many hours. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I think you and I had this conversation earlier, and one of the things that popped in my head around Jacinda's Ardern's resignation speech, she said something like, I know, she said she acknowledged that there was going to be a lot of talk afterwards around the real reason why she resigned. And she was like, no, this is the real reason, right? But I'm curious because I spoke about sort of the backlash that you did receive from the culture of the company that you were coming out of. And and I think so there might be some people who are listening who are saying, yes, I hear what you guys are saying. And yes, I need to put into place some things to make sure that I don't have burnout, or I am experiencing burnout and I need to take a pause. But they may be in an industry where that's just not a thing, or they may have grown up in a family of origin where there are messages saying that's not okay. They may have a societal expectation that it's not okay. So, how did you manage that in terms of managing the voices saying the naysayers? And how did you step outside of that culture in order to do what you needed to do for yourself?
Yeah. So honestly, the main reason why I didn't want to go to the doctor was because of the backlash. One, with the work backlogs, like I can't afford to take a day off because at the time I was working 6 days with 1 day off. So this was 12-hour shifts, right? So 6 12-hour shifts in a week. with 1 day off. And that 1 day off was when I did all the momming, the house chores. I didn't know anything about outsourcing house things back then.
Mm-hmm,
You know,
mm-hmm.
because speaking of family of origin,
6 days, 12 hours, and then only 1 day off.
yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, it's
Because my sister's a nurse and they have those, but they do them where it's like you get like
helps.
you have like 3 days or 4 days where you're doing those crazy, and then you have like 3 days off, and it's kind of like that. But no, you're talking
That's
about all the
the
time.
normal schedule, but we
Hmm.
were short-staffed, so
Okay.
the max we could do was what we call a 6-in-1,
Hmm.
because per the union contract, we were, that was the max that we could work.
Got it. Okay.
But you could also choose, you could have the choice to override that. But
And
there,
do 7/12s?
well, you could do, like, there was a guy that just liked the extra money, so he was working like almost 20 days straight, and then they had to tell him like, no, you can't. Like, you
Wow.
have to take a day off. Yeah, it's the nature of the oil and gas industry.
Right.
There are
That must
some,
have been difficult for you to decide to even take care of yourself in that culture.
yeah, because it was like, oh, and speaking about the female aspect, like,
Hmm.
well, you're a girl. Maybe you can't hang with us boys.
Hmm.
Maybe you're not cut out for this. And there, like you said, those voices that were
Yeah.
in my head, and I didn't know what they were. I knew what they were talking about after I left. So I was out of work for about 3 months to recover and heal. And my husband and I both worked in the same facility. So he was behind, and he kind of heard the murmuring that was happening, behind my back. And people were
Yeah.
saying, like, oh, maybe she's just faking it. Oh. And my husband had to tell them, no, she went to the doctor. She got these tests run,
Yeah.
and she has an actual diagnosis.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, so you might be hearing people say, yeah, well, I work for myself, so maybe I don't have those problems. But the thing is, those messages are messages that we get from early, 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 early on, depending upon, the class that you grew up in, the family you grew up in, the subculture you grew up in, the message that you were told around work and taking time off and caring for yourself, those get in our heads. And even though someone may not be saying it, and even though you are your free agent because you own your own business and you're the one, but the message that you get around what it means to take care of oneself, that's what's going to you're going to hit up against that. And I think it's really important to say, like, acknowledge it and then be able to say, no, but if I don't take care of myself, my business dies. If I don't take care of this, my family won't get what it is that I need to get from them. And if I don't take care of that, I'm actually worthy of just taking care of myself. And I think the thing is, you talked about sort of the gender dynamic, because there were some newspaper articles that came out. I think it was I don't know. I think that it might have been the BBC that had a thing. It's like it was,
mm,
can women have it all, or something to that effect. I don't know what article, what news entity said it, coming in the title of the article in terms of talking about her resignation. And I think there's always this caveat around maybe women can't tough it out, maybe women can't handle it. And now, obviously, we know that that's not true, but those sentiments exist. And if you are a woman and you're thinking, wait, I'm feeling burnt out, and I don't want to, I can't lead in a way that would be helpful, because I think that's one of the things that she said. It's like, she's like, as a good leader, you need to know when it's time to not. Because I think we all know the poor decisions we make in our personal lives when we are tired and exhausted and burnt out. Can you
right.
imagine
Can
the
you
things that
imagine
you would
leading
make
a
in as a
country
leader? Yeah.
and saying, hey, maybe, or there's this conflict with this other country? Yeah. And like,
Right. Right. I mean, I wonder about, some of the wars that have been waged. Like, were you exhausted when you decided to wage war? I mean, because I think that we make poor
huh?
choices. We allow a lot of things
And versus
to
logical.
yeah, and use anger, resentment, those kinds of things to come out. So, I think just knowing that there are these messages that show up I think is another element to just making the decision about how to prevent burnout, which is the first thing I think that you, Kylie, are saying. And then also when you are experiencing burnout, how to recognize it and walk it back.
Yeah.
And then third, if you're over the cliff already, what you need to do at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, people are coming when they're already over the cliff or their like toes are on the edge. They're like, oh, it's a long way down. Getting scary and I need some help.
Yes.
Like, hey, before
Yeah.
you get to the peak, before you get to the precipice, let's
Yeah.
chat, if you're feeling tired.
Exactly.
But I wanted to go back to something that you said. Oh, or maybe you didn't say it, but it hit me, like family of origin and what's acceptable, not acceptable.
Yeah.
I know for me, like outsourcing housework,
Hmm.
not acceptable. You're not a real woman if you can't keep house.
Mm-mm. Okay. See, that's the message. And you don't realize it until it's because it's so ingrained in you.
Or are you too uppity to do your own chores?
Yes. Yeah. See? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's so important to figure that out. Like, what are those messages really?
Yeah.
And then sometimes people have like, I was in a mastermind group and we were sort of talking about money stories. And there were people from different walks of life, different classes, different all these different things. But everyone was a business owner and doing what they needed to do. And this one person came from wealth.
Mm.
Not like 1% wealth, but like, they were they were not middle class. They were way
Above.
above middle
Yeah.
class. And, and she said that she felt like she perpetually had a great deal of guilt around the fact that she had money. And so there were decisions that she wouldn't make or was uncomfortable making because she felt guilty and a bit of shame around her wealth. So, my reason why I brought that up is because we all have stories, we all have what should be, what shouldn't be, voices in our head that we've inherited because of our culture, because of our family of origin, all of these types of things. It doesn't have to mean just because if you came from a family that's middle class and has some, middle class ideologies around, play it safe and, sort of those things that we get taught.
Yeah.
So, whatever stage of life you are, whatever your background is, know that there's a story around this. So, pay attention to it and ask yourself the question, is there any resistance to this idea? What are the beliefs that I have about this? Whose voice is it that's in my head that's telling me I can't do this? So that you can at least walk through it and then step in. 'Cause in the end,
Yes.
you're trying to build a business. You can't build a business if you're not caring for yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes we can't care for ourselves if we're still stuck in the limiting beliefs and those patterns
Yes.
you're brought up in. Like, and yeah, when you're talking about wealth and guilt, like I grew up in, I guess
Mhm.
it would be middle class, but Hawaii is a very expensive state, you know.
Mhm.
So um I would say like we didn't have money. And then
Mhm.
when I got, into oil and gas, it's a very lucrative industry. So it's like, oh, from a very young age, I was making pretty good money. And so the guilt of leaving that job was like highly desirable. Like, where are you gonna get a job like that?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, there's so much there. And then you also too, if like left corporate, went to start your business, and if you realize that the way that your business is currently structured is not serving you well in terms of, your life and so forth, you might have some guilt around that because maybe maybe you have some guilt internally like, oh man, I left this job and now this isn't working the way that I wanted it to. Or you might have made some promises to your spouse or your partner around starting the business and it's a difficult conversation to now say, well, honey, this is what I had planned, but this is how it's affecting me, so I need to make some shift gears.
Yeah.
In the end, a part of it is just knowing that you are worthy and of this, worthy of being healthy, worthy of being in a place where you are feeling abundant in terms of vitality, in terms of your health, in terms of life and joy. And so, even though it may require some difficult conversations, it may require you having some reckoning, it may require you recognize, like, having some guilt around whatever it is you feel like, or shame around, oh, I started this thing and now it's not, whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, it's still important to address it.
Yeah. And I think if we were to leave, some proactive steps, like one, we have to get in touch with our feelings. Like, what are we feeling? What are we thinking? And it sounds so cliche, but I really encourage my clients to journal.
Mm-hmm,
And to
mm-hmm,
journal with a piece of or paper and
mm-hmm,
a pen,
mm-hmm.
because when we're typing things out, I know there's science around it, but when we flow freely from the head to the pen, we are bypassing the logic sometimes. Like if we're just free flow journaling, like
Yeah, yeah,
the real stuff will come out. And I
yeah.
think I mean, I've been in therapy, coaching and whatever for a long time. And it's so therapeutic to just tell things to my journal, like the
Yeah.
real things that I'm feeling. And like nobody has to hear about it, but we're getting it out of our head. So we're decluttering our thoughts, putting it on paper. And then when it's on paper, we can actually see it and deal with
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yes.
It's like knowing your numbers for your business. If you have no idea, if you're not looking at your cash flow, your bank accounts, you're like, I don't know. The next thing you know, like, oh, I'm headed for bankruptcy. Oh, how did that
How did
happen?
that happen?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
We're pulling the thoughts out of our brains, putting it on paper, and then once we have the data, we can analyze it. We can check for thought patterns like, okay, what's really coming up? What's
Yeah.
the real reason why I'm feeling this way? And I have my clients also using the time wheel on a scale of 1 to 5. How are they feeling energetically?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I have plans to put out a journal or a planner, but it's going to have the time
The
tracker,
time wheel. Mm-hmm.
time wheel, and the energy tracker, because burnout occurs in different, like the 4 quadrants.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just the physical. If we wait until the physical, then pretty
Too
much,
far along. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the 3 other areas are pretty much, a 1 or a 0. And
Yeah.
some days, like how you were saying, like we didn't exert a lot of physical energy, but we exerted a lot of mental energy. So really keeping track of those 4 quadrants and your energy in those quadrants really
Mm-hmm.
makes a difference. Like, well, I just sat on my computer all day. But what did you do? Were you coming up with a strategy, for your next masterclass or, whatever? Or were you writing, a sales page for your website? Because that's pretty taxing on the brain, you know,
Right.
and you're like, well, I feel like I didn't do anything because you didn't check anything off the box. But when you
Right.
look at what you did do and like the energy that you expended, it's like, oh, that's why I'm feeling this way. And then it could be coupled with, the journaling, and you can kind of match up what you journaled about and your energy quadrants. And you're like,
And then you can,
oh,
that's such a great tool. Well, maybe you can put that, I don't know if you can put that in the link of this talk so people can have access to that time wheel, because I think it's a great tool.
yeah, actually, you can get it at timemanagementprinciple.com. But I'll put the link in the show notes,
Yeah.
in the
Perfect.
comments for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, wow, this is really, I hope that this has been helpful, Kylie. I'm glad we decided to do this sort of one-off conversation around it, particularly as it relates to, coming off of the resignation of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, because I think that that was a prime example of how it can show up in leadership.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And how, as females and leaders, I think we have to be more cognizant of burnout and burnout symptoms because we have a responsibility. We have a higher level of responsibility because we have
Mm-hmm.
a you're running a company or running a
Mhm.
business,
Yeah.
we have people, we have direct reports that,
Mhm.
like say you're working in a corporation. Yes, you have direct reports, but people are coming in and out of the company, people transfer, whatever, but the company still runs. It's bigger. But when you are the CEO of your business, right, you need to maintain yourself because you are pretty much the business.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun today.
This was fantastic, Kylie. I'm so glad that we did this, and I'm glad that I hope that people get some value from it. And yeah, totally.
Yay. Okay, so a couple of things we're going to throw in the comments. We're going to post the video link of Jacinda Ardern's resignation speech. And then I'll also post a link to the time management principle where you can get a copy of the time wheel and you'll see how, the time and money relate, the ideas and energy relate, and a couple of steps that you can take to help assess where you are on the burnout scale. Because there's a burnout assessment tool in there as well. You're going to take that assessment and really just look at where you are.
Yes.
And like, there's no shame in the game. And it's best to just be honest, rate yourself and give yourself an honest score because this is
Yes.
for you, right? That
Yes.
maybe this is your first step in taking care of yourself. Like, you don't have to go the full gamut, but take that first step in understanding, where you are. And if you're cool, you're cool. Like, just check off the box. Got my test result, check off the box and you're done. But if you are feeling like maybe you want to assess some things in your life, go ahead, time managementprinciple.com, go get the assessment and, just it's time for you. It's time to, take care of yourself. You've been taking care of so many people for so long. It's time to take care of you now.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, for being here today.
You're
Hope
welcome,
you guys
Kylie. What a
have
joy. What a pleasure. And guys, it's been a pleasure having us talk with everyone out there and
Oh,
get
I
that
want to tell
time with.
people about your six um your
Oh,
food.
yeah, the True Cups of Chaos.
Yes.
Well, yes. So, this is a bit, so I've got a great ebook. If you feel like the reasons why you're feeling burnout is because there's chaos in the business, and usually, I like to call them symptoms of chaos. Um, Usually, it's sort of like you're not scaling or you can't take any time off, which ends up into burnout, or you're having some difficulty with the resources or any of those type of things. I do have a book that you can that outlines what I call the 8 true culprits that are causing chaos in your business. It's the 8 true culprits causing chaos in your business. The website is www.nobusinesschaos.com, nobusinesschaos.com. And what in that book, what I've done is basically provide you the what I consider the fundamental causes of chaos in a business and some tools to allow you to fix it. So if you feel that you're experiencing some burnout or you're on the verge of burnout and you think it's related to chaos in the business, this would be a really great tool.
Yeah, I think, using the time management principle plus the chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you'll just be able to have a better clarity about, okay, I am in chaos.
Yeah,
Realize, I mean, I am in burnout. Okay, I'm there, and this is how it's connected. So for sure.
yeah,
Um,
man, the synergy in those two tools.
Yay! Yeah.
Yeah. So again, thank you for being here today and having
Absolutely,
this
Kylie.
conversation. It's such, that's why we jumped on live because, right, it's a time sensitive, it's a current event.
Mm-hmm.
So Carrie Ann's podcast episode is going to come out later,
Mm-hmm.
in a couple of weeks or so. But I wanted to come on live here to talk
Right.
about this today
This
because
important topic, exactly.
like right now.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
thank
Well, I absolutely love chatting with you, Kylie, and I'm really looking forward to other things we can do to sort of highlight and really support business owners. Because in the end, I believe that, particularly business owners that are small and medium-sized companies, very important to our economy, so important to our local cities, our states. So it's important for us to be able to support them. And if you're burned out, you can't be doing what you're doing. And we need to see all that you're doing. So
Yes, we need you.
we need you. So come on out.
We need you. Okay, thank you for being here today, everyone. And we'll see you again on the next time. Bye.
Bye.